time just passes so quickly, but also seems like weeks go by and we don't connect. So I'm glad that we're still doing these conversations that count. And it's great to have you here. I just wanted to just announce as well, there's the conference coming up in August, and Nikki tells me that the early bird special, which is a 10% discount, will end at the end of April. So if you're interested and if that means something to you, by all means, let's sign up. We've had some fantastic response, so it's really good. It's going to be in Johannesburg, and we've got some really great content and good things lined up. So to all of you, we'd love to see you there, and we can start the planning and perhaps link it to a business trip, or come and visit your offices in Joburg if you need to. That'd be great. I'm particularly delighted to welcome on our conversation that counts this morning a colleague, actually, within the GBTA. We are very, very privileged, actually. Privileged is a great word, to have Linda Bekoe with us today. And Linda will give us an exact account of her role and what her responsibility is. But it's just an indication of just the work that is done by the GBTA on a broad basis. And we all get to see just some of the most incredible things that the GBTA is involved in. And so, Linda, a very warm African welcome to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
No, really appreciate it. And I have to ask you, you're in London, or you're from the UK. Whereabouts are you right now?
I'm actually in London. I live about 60 miles from London, so a little bit in the countryside, should I say. But as I was saying earlier, that London spring is not here yet. So, I really envy your weather there. And definitely, I think Joburg and Cape Town is close to my heart anyway. I have to make a year.
Well, so you've obviously been before.
Yeah, a few times. Yeah, I was there in February, actually.
Wow.
So, so. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, Joburg summer hasn't left us yet. We are in a bit of a heat wave at the moment. It gets very warm in the days, and we're in our autumn, so we shouldn't be. But it just is an indication of the weather generally, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So, Linda, as a kickoff, perhaps outside of the GBTA, your involvement in the travel industry, what is it all about, and how long has it been?
Well, I think like everyone, if you get the travel bug, you never leave. So, I hate to say this, but I've probably been involved in travel for over 15 years. I originally started working for the larger chains from a sales perspective, worked for a couple of larger chains, then moved to smaller chains. And then I ran a representation company. And then in October 2019, that's when I had the smart idea to open my own company, representing hotels and apartments. And then we all know what happened after that.
Exactly.
So I really was able to, I would say, pivot from the hotel world to more apartments, because I think in those days, we all know people would have to travel to this country, spend 3 months here to be able to go to this country. So that's where I started to really work a lot more with apartments. And I always say that that's the only good thing that COVID did, was to put apartments onto the travel landscape. So I represent about 600 properties globally, all of them located in key cities. I've got a lovely team. I've got Claudia, who's based in Joburg, who works with me. And then we act as an extension of the sales team for individual properties and chains.
Oh, fantastic. It's a big thing now. It really is. And obviously the properties in both Cape Town, Joburg, and I would imagine in other, well, certainly Zambia and the Kenyan markets as well. I would imagine that there's a huge market there. So, okay. And then in your precious free time and your additional time, you are the chair of the GBTA, and I'm going to call it the DEI committee, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, but I know you're going to tell me differently. So that's your responsibility now.
Yes, it is. As of October last year, I took over the responsibility of chairing this committee. And there's about, I keep saying, we are growing quite nicely. There's about 18 of us so far as part of that committee. One of my key goals was to make sure that the committee was very global. And I like to say that I've achieved that. We've got a very global spectrum in terms of representation from Asia, so Singapore representation, as well as Egypt. I am looking for someone in South Africa. So, you might see me reaching out purely because I believe that when it comes to DE&I and, inclusion and culture, it's different in all regions. So it's important for us to address it globally and not just focus on one particular region. And as a committee, we need to make sure that we give people the tools, no matter where they are, to deal with anything in terms of inclusion and culture in that sense.
That's wonderful. Well, Linda, we have an array of very eager and wonderful support in our committees and that. So by all means, reach out. We'll be only too happy to help.
Perfect. Excellent. Good.
And then how did the inclusion and culture change, or how did you change the world? Let's put it that way.
I think for me, it was twofold because, there's a lot of DE&I fatigue. And I think that, when you start to talk to companies about, DE&I, there is that fatigue in organizations. And, we really sat back in terms of the committee and looked at what do we want to achieve when we talk about DE&I. And the bottom line is we want to achieve inclusion. So every time I'm talking to someone or talking to people, I always tell people that, just close your eyes and imagine yourself on the playground as a child and nobody wanting to play with you, and that is how it feels when you're not included. And that is where we as a committee want to make sure that nobody feels that way in terms from a travel perspective, in terms of our companies. Hence, that's why we moved the name from DE&I to inclusion.
It makes such good sense. And then did you add on the culture?
Yes, we added on the culture because I believe that whilst everyone is global, everybody's cultural nuances are different. So, for example, I've done a lot of learning as well. What is acceptable in Asia might not be acceptable in certain countries. So it's important for us to respect different people's cultures and incorporate that into our travel program and also educating our travelers. So that's why we added the word culture to it as well.
That's fantastic. And I think that really touches me because I think it's so important, and we see it so much from a South African perspective. And I'm sure you're familiar with our broad-based Black Economic Empowerment, our BEE scorecards, which have been very instrumental in transformation of the country. But I think we miss the boat sometimes, and particularly on that culture issue. So I think it's great. Wonderful. We call ourselves the Rainbow Nation because we kind of all fell together in 1994 and have made it work to an extent. And yeah, we get very excited and very happy when our sports teams play or win or lose. We get very emotional as well. But it does show, that there is a common thread in our cultures, no matter how different they are. There's that common ground that we find as a nation, which has been a wonderful journey, but also a painful journey. I can add to that.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Linda, I believe you have a short presentation, which perhaps we can, if you'd like to share it now, we can actually just go through that and give everybody a good idea. And then perhaps just you can dive a little deeper into what it is that you're involved in and the kind of projects or opportunities you're looking at.
Okay, definitely. And I think, I do like to keep this interactive. I don't necessarily want to be, talking all the time. If there are any questions during the presentation, please stop me at any time at all. You should hopefully be seeing my screen in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to do it. Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, excellent. So I know we've discussed again, why the name was changed to Inclusion and Culture, but this is how we are known, and we had to literally get approval from the board as well to make sure that our name was changed. And just going on to, our mission statement, and I always like to start off with our mission statement because in terms of our mission statement, we believe that, everybody's welcome. And I think if you look at what we do in terms of travel professionals, it's our job to make sure that everybody that walks through our doors or everybody that's taking part in our travel journey feels welcome. So we always talk about GBTA, making sure that everybody is welcome. People are the center of everything that we do. And in terms of our committee, we work very well with the sustainability committee as well, because we are intertwined in terms of the ESG. So I always like to start off with our mission statement as well. And then for us, when it comes to our vision, our vision is to ensure that there's that transparency, and more importantly, we give a voice to people that do not have a voice. And that is where we need to make sure that, whether we're putting together a travel program or communicating to our internal stakeholders, we do look at the overall landscape and make sure that we're prioritizing people and obviously planet and sustainability as well. So I always like to start off with our mission and our vision statement just to get people aligned to what we believe in as a committee. In terms of the different areas that we focus on, so we split it into subcommittees. We've got race and culture, and then LGBTQ, gender balance, which I believe Robyn, you talked about the paper with ageism as well, and that's what we did on that. Generational equality, mental health, and then accessibility. There are a number of things that we're currently working on. So we've got a subcommittee that's heavily focused on accessibility. And when I talk about accessibility, it's both seen and unseen accessibilities. And there's a lot of work at the moment that we're doing on neurodiversity, and I'll be able to, dive in a little bit deeper on that as well. In terms of the LGBTQ community, there's a lot of work that we're doing as well. And again, I'll focus on that. Generational equality. We are doing a number of things on ageism, and not just in terms of, being too old, but also being too young. And one of the things that we're doing is we're doing a keynote session at the GBTA in Atlanta as well. In terms of who we are, so there's myself, and I'm the chair, and then I've got my vice chair, Teresa, and then these are just the board members. I'll share this presentation with you as well. Each of them have subcommittees and specialists, but what we like to do is to make sure that we are available, and as a board, we don't know everything, but what we can do is maybe guide you in the right direction. So I'll share this with you, and feel free to reach out to any of them in that sense. What I wanted to do is, before we dive in deeper, I'm just going to stop sharing at the moment. If you just bear with me. Perfect. Okay. So I just wanted to talk through some of the projects that we're doing. And some of the initiatives that we are doing in terms of a subcommittee, just to give you guys some context and maybe, what we should be thinking about. And for us, it's also getting feedback from our different GBTA members to find out what's important to each of you in your region and how we can support that. And for me, that's probably one of our greatest mission, is to make sure that we're supporting you in whatever journey you are in terms of DE&I and inclusion. So before I go on to talk about the different things that we're doing, does anybody have any questions or anything that they'll like to add or nominate themselves to join us?
Don't all rush.
Perfect. Okay.
Everybody's good.
No problem. So I'm going to just dive into some of the key things that we're doing in terms of as a committee to really make sure that, you know, we are supporting the wider travel space. Now, we did launch our white paper, which was ageism, as you said, Robyn, and that was heavily focused on how, as a community, we need to recognize different people, and that's something that, you know, I think is so important, because sometimes, you know, we alienate certain people. So there are certain regions, for example, like India, where when you reach certain threshold, you know, like I wouldn't be allowed to work because, you know, I'm past 40. You know, and again, yeah, you know, and again, we've got so much to offer. So that paper was really based on that. And what I will do is after this as well, I'll share all the different resources with you so that you can tap into that. And I think that's important, especially when we're looking for talent at the moment in our industry. You know, we need to look outside, and, you know, there are possibilities of looking at new talent. If I think of some of my colleagues at the moment who probably have left the industry because they've got kids, and, you know, there's a little bit of non-flexibility in that sense, you know, these are things that we need to think about when it comes to attracting new people. And then we recently launched our white paper on the LGBT community. And the purpose of this white paper was to really give people a starting point in terms of when you're putting together your travel program, where some of the risk areas are, how you can educate your travelers where they should and can't go to. And at the end of the day, the way we always look at it is that our job is to educate. Our job is to make sure that, you know, our travelers throughout their journey are fully equipped with the information that they need. And there's nothing more than, you know, somebody not being able to travel to a certain destination and missing out on a conference or whatever it is, and that will, you know, maybe not help their growth. So this again is a resource that I think that, you know, it's really quite good to start the journey if you are looking at how you can incorporate some form of communication in your travel policy and even your travel program. So again, I'll be able to, you know, share that with you in terms of that. The biggest thing that we're currently working on is a toolkit. So the toolkit is based on all the different subcommittees that I've talked about, and we are providing resources on each of those. So, and it's really about information that you can easily tap into, and information in the sense of, we don't know everything, but we've got certain articles, certain research that will give you that ability, if you're being asked questions internally, that you can present to your stakeholders. So that is a resource that is available. It's on the GBTA hub, but I will send you the link. What I will do is maybe connect with each of you and then just send you the link to those. We recently also did a podcast, which I did a podcast based on the importance of inclusion. You know, and again, going back to making sure that everybody is included. And throughout this journey, I have learned so much, because when it comes to seen or unseen disabilities, there was statistics which said that 70% of people in organizations do not disclose if they're neurodivergent.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you know, it actually made me quite sad in a way, because people don't want people to have certain perceptions, you know, and therefore I was talking to one gentleman, and he stopped taking trips completely, because he said that for him, when he gets to the airport, it's just too much for him, and he will be that guy that is sweating, and then, you know, when you're sweating and you're going through security, straight away alarm bells start to ring, you know. So he stopped traveling, which was really bad, because then he stopped his growth in terms of the organization. You know, he just said no to everything, and being able to disclose that as a travel manager or a travel professional, we can look for solutions. And I was talking to Gatwick recently, and they've got a separate entrance. So anybody that's neurodivergent doesn't need to go through the whole hustle and bustle of, whether it's Gatwick or Heathrow. They have separate entrances. And these are things that we can only help our travelers with if we know. And even if you look at, accessibility, for example, I was talking to a lady who was in a wheelchair, and she was talking to me about, hotels, and this is what I deal in hotels. And when we say that we've got accessible rooms, and it's so shocking because when she talked me through all the properties that she had stayed in, that we claim that we have accessible rooms, but we don't. Usually, from a hotel perspective, because the room is larger and a wheelchair can fit into it, that's it. But we don't think about things like levers. We don't think about, the height of the toilet and so many things. Mm. And that started to get me thinking about, what questions should we ask my community, as in hotels. When you say you've got accessible room, it's not good enough just to tick the fact that you've got accessible room.
Yeah, quite right.
You really need to tell us what is in that accessible room. And I was working with the travel manager from Atkins, and he was telling me that he put together a list of 20 questions. Again, I'm happy to share that with you, because it just allows you to just dig a little bit deeper into the supply community, because if you have that information, you can actually help your travelers in that sense. And just really providing them the right information. So that, let's say this hotel has these certain facilities, then at least that you can provide that information as well. And this same traveler was telling me about, things like accessible toilets. When we say we've got accessible toilets, sometimes it's up the stairs and there's no lift. So it's, I have learned so much about, accessibility, and I'm at the point now where I like to put myself in that person's shoes. Because when you put yourself in that person's shoes, whether they have to be lifted up the stairs to go to the toilet, think about how you would feel. So it's just making sure that we work with our supply community. And sometimes it's just an educational thing. It's just making sure that your suppliers understand that this is what your travelers want. And we just need to be comfortable with that. I mean, even if you look at, airlines, for example, I was asked a question that how does a disabled person go to the toilet in a plane?
Yeah.
I've never thought about that, but my friend asked me, how do you think? But it's never crossed my mind, because they physically have to go to the pilot section and get somebody to lift them up.
Okay.
Yeah, but how comfortable would you feel with that? And are these questions that we need to ask as our pre-approval for them to travel? There was another incident where a gentleman told me that he needed an extra belt, but the air stewardess came around and said, no, you need that belt, and he felt so uncomfortable. He knows he needs the belt.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a language thing as well, and training our people to be mindful. You don't need to shout in the aircraft that he needs the extra belt. He knows he needs the extra belt. But is this something that he could have, preempted and filled it in as his profile so that they know that he needs the extra belt? So instead, she'll come over and just give him the extra belt quietly and not necessarily.
Exactly.
It's just little things like that has really, I think, educated me and also my team. And now you'll find that some companies, in terms of their TMC, have an accessibility desk where people have the ability to call in confidently and say, this is what I need. And again, just changing the whole traveler experience, you know, and that's important. That's really important. And I had another travel manager that was telling me that, she needed to put together a policy for her LGBTQ travelers. And she had been asked by HR to do this, but she didn't know where to start, in terms of where's safe, where's not. And this is something that we've incorporated in our toolkit. So once we get the feedback of what's important, then we can make sure that we give that information to do that. One of the committee members, Andrew, he's working on including certain accessible questions as part of the GDS. It's taken him a while. He's been working on it for 2 years, but it's just incorporating that as part of the GDS as a drop down for when, for when consultants are searching. And you say disabled room, it just lists what you need.
Yeah.
And that's what we need.
It seems like such common sense, but actually there's nothing common about it, actually. Quite incredible. I'm interested, and just going back to the neurodivergent categories, and I think many of us have experienced somebody who's dealt with panic and a panic attack of some sort. Now, I would imagine that would be a similar claim. What other aspects does that, or what other conditions as such does your neurodivergency cover?
Autism. Autism, that's really key. So there's been an incident where a traveler went to India, and as soon as they got off the plane, Bangalore is so busy, they just couldn't cope. And they had to get on the next flight back. So autism is really key, but it's just understanding that, if somebody's neurodivergent, they just think differently. They just process things differently. When you're having a conference, for example, do you place them in a little bit of a quiet area, have quiet rooms, because everything just gets too busy for them, and sometimes they need to step away, but if you look at the different spectrums of neurodiversity, what the value they bring, their attention to detail, their creativity, but they just need that space, to be able to do that and function at the best of their ability in that sense. I've got a couple of papers that I can share with you, because I think that they found that, especially after COVID, there's a lot more people that have certain conditions. I think us being cooped at home for 2 years probably didn't help, but this condition is arising a lot. And it's important for us to let our travelers know that it's okay for you to tell us this information. We will use it the best of your effort, because sometimes people don't want to tell us, because what are we going to do with that information?
Exactly.
But it's creating that safe environment that the information that you're giving me, I'm going to use it for your benefit, to make sure that your traveler experience is better, your conference experience is better, whatever experience, my job is to make it better for you. Yeah.
Oh, it's fascinating. It really is. And it's, it just also goes back to the point of a travel policy or a travel program that we have is not necessarily a document you write once a year, once every 2. It's it's very fluid and needs to be amended and introduced and different policies into it. And I perhaps ask a question to the audience, how many of us have taken that into consideration and included those kind of clauses or policies around it, where we've actually, which is also the first step in being inclusive, was you actually acknowledging that we're a business that recognizes and keeps you in the loop, and we protect your interest and you as a person, as a human being. It's amazing. From a global perspective, and let's take the UK, for example, is there a growing conversation around the inclusivity?
Yes, there is. There really is. I think you know, like you, we do a lot of industry events, and every industry event you go to, we still have sustainability on the map. We still do. But it's more moving to inclusivity. And there's a lot more conversations around that because that's the bigger picture of your ESG as well. And I think, you know, companies have certain goals that they need to achieve, you know, not just sustainability, but in terms of being inclusive. So there's a lot more conversations around this. And there was a conversation recently about, does it sit with the travel manager or does it sit with HR? And it's, you know, it's something that we're still debating. But as you know, travel, we get involved in everything, whether it's risk management or, you know, it's like you have to wear multiple hats. So whilst it might sit with HR, your travelers will still be knocking on your door to get this information.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even if we are those that initiate these conversations with HR, that's really important. And I think from an African standpoint, you know, there are many countries in Africa that are not as tolerant, particularly on the LGBTQ, and certainly the culture of the country is not as embracing as it is everywhere, or not as inclusive as it is in other parts of the world. However, the travel managers are faced with the challenge that they are working for a multinational company. So the company has laid out their policies and their rules, and there's an implementation. It's quite a big step, and it's quite a broad gap to fill, and to be seen to be, you know, almost going against the trend of the country, when you're in a multinational company as such. I don't know if that's a.
I mean, I think that, you know, and this incident has occurred a number of times. I think that, you know, when I spoke to one travel manager, what she said was that her job is to give you that information. So once you have that information in terms of what you can and you can't do in that country, you need to weigh, like the traveler needs to weigh how important it is for them to take that trip. So there was one particular gentleman who went to India, for example, and he was a senior person from the LGBT community. But when he went to India, he presented himself completely different. You know, and that's because of the culture in that particular country that he was going to.
Sure.
So, you know, again, our job is always to inform and educate. And then it is the traveler's decision if they want to make that journey, if it's important enough. Because there was another incident where somebody was traveling through, I think it was Dubai, and you know, they had to look for an alternate flight for them because so that they wouldn't transit in Dubai. You know, the alternate flight was a little bit more expensive, but that information was given to them, and their senior leadership had to sign off because the flight was a little bit more above their cap.
Right. And to your I mean, that certainly involves the traveler. And I'm thinking as well along the travel manager within countries, and I'm thinking particularly Africa, within countries where the local policy and the local culture is not as inclusive as the rest of the world. However, I, as a travel manager, I work for a multinational company who are instilling these policies in the business, and I have to manage that. And sometimes I think it must be a challenge. It must be having to go against the grain where we are, including things in travel policy and having to explain the things in travel policy. And I've always said one of the bigger challenges for any travel manager is being able to communicate the contents of the policy with the travelers and the bookers within the business. So yeah, it's all over. I mean, it touches so many different aspects of the business travel that we do, or the travel management policies and culture that we have.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an interesting.
It is. And I think that, you know, this is where wearing multiple hats has always come into play. I mean, we know that travel managers, they multitask so much. But I think that probably comes into play a lot more as well, because you are working for a multinational. and you have to be careful, because if people are seeing the global policy, it's whether you have an in-country policy. So sometimes some of the travel managers that I talk to, they have an in-country policy where it's different to what it is globally. It's a little bit more work, but then you can alleviate, or you can help all your key stakeholders, because you've got a global, and then the global feeds off the in-country program on what's relevant.
No, it's very interesting. Linda, what's next? I know you've spoken of these projects. What's next for the committee and for you?
I think for the committee, what we are trying to do is we are heavily focusing on the youth. So we are doing a number of projects, and I will talk to you about that as well, in terms of scholarships, where we are trying to get the youth to come to some of our conferences, understand a little bit more about travel, because unfortunately, when you talk about travel, people still think that we just, do tickets, and, they don't really understand. So we are doing a big campaign to let people understand, in terms of universities, in terms of colleges, the bigger scope, because you can do IT, you can do procurement, you can do marketing, you can do AI. There's so much talk about AI and how, so we're trying to let the youth see the bigger picture of what you can achieve in travel, and it's not just ticketing. So that's going to be our focus, I would say, for the next couple of months. Just giving scholarships to various people that want to understand a little bit more about our travel.
Right, that's exciting. You mentioned something, and it was one of my next questions as well, is the role of artificial intelligence in the inclusive and the inclusive world that we live in, or we should be living in. How is that going to be affected? And surely that will have some sort of an impact.
Do you know, it's really funny, because personally, I've been doing a lot with AI, and AI is only as good as the information that we feed it. And interestingly enough, somebody told me to do this exercise, which is, ask Chat GBT that what does a terrorist look like? And it'll come up with a certain persona, but that's because what they've been fed, So I think that for me, AI should be taken into some context. It can be used for automation and, helping us do certain tasks. But I think that we have to be careful, because you have to remember that people are feeding the machine, and it's machine learning. So it will take some time to evolve. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think it's in many aspects, not just in this. I think it's in many aspects, and we are very, I think as a community, or as a generation, we will become more and more dependent on it. But they are, as somebody said to me the other day, it's very smart, but it's not very wise.
Yes.
That's exactly it.
Completely agree. I mean, for me, I think, I was at this event recently, and they were showing how AI can help you do branding, and what they can do within an hour and a half. People take about 3 weeks to come up with a concept of brand. And it was very playful, but it got me thinking about, this is a machine, and if you're doing a brand and you want your company to look inclusive, is the AI going to know that? I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just some things to think about. Food for thought. But but then you have the youth. If I look at my son, he asks Alexa for anything. Mummy doesn't know anything. So anything he wants to know, he'll just ask her, Good for me, because I would give him wrong information anyway.
That's the challenge. Yeah, we all know where to look for it. We just don't know the foundation of it. I'm going to open up to the audience now, and just to ask, are there any particular questions, anything you'd like Linda to clarify or to check in about? Anybody have any questions or statement, or just a observation? I see. Yeah, Joey. Lovely. We'd love to hear from you, Joe. unmute yourself?
Apologies, I was struggling to unmute.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Robyn and Nikki, for putting this together, and to Linda for this very informative session. You said something very interesting in relation to, being very inclusive. And I did come across a case after COVID, actually, where a colleague reached out to us and they were asking that we book 2 seats for them because they had, had changes during that period. And it was such a difficult process to manage because the manager did not understand or agree to paying for 2 seats. And now it's a long process that you need to go to HC and get a doctor's letter. They must confirm that is something that must be done. And at the same time, that traveler is already uncomfortable sharing that information. And I just find that our policy could do better to be very inclusive, and it shouldn't be such a long process that you have to go from one person to another discussing the topic that you are already very uncomfortable about. So I think that is very important, and I'm very glad that you shared that. And I'm looking forward to reading about all the stuff that you talked about and listening to the podcast as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah.
Any comment on the whole weight shaming aspect? I mean, because that I would imagine is just as much of an issue.
Yeah, it's hard because I think that it's really hard to communicate to companies sometimes because there's cost involved. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with people. And think about how that person felt, even asking for the 2 seats. And then they have to explain it all the way up the ladder. It will get to a point where that person will stop traveling.
Yeah.
And think of the knowledge that we're not getting because that is not traveling.
No, absolutely. Wendy, I see you have your hand up. Lovely to hear from you.
Hi. Yes, I had something. It was actually pre-COVID. It was a traveler. So it wasn't really about LGBTQ or anything. She was a Muslim traveler traveling to the UK, and at the time there'd been quite a few attacks and incidents, and I hadn't even taken that into consideration. And she specifically came and sort of said to me she was very nervous to be going, and please could I rather book shuttles, because she was a bit nervous of the public transport. But at least she was brave enough to come forward and ask. And I think, that did highlight to me that we don't consider people's cultures enough, and what the realities are in the world out there.
Exactly. Really is. It's wow, it's
Yeah.
sobering.
Yeah, it is. And I think that, I would say, kudos to you for creating that environment for her to come and talk to you about it, because that's the first step, and creating an environment where people feel comfortable to air their views or their opinions. So, well done, because it means that you've got definitely the right culture in that aspect, because somebody would have just paid for it herself, but knowing that they could come to you and you would do something about it. That's what we need to do. Just make sure that people feel comfortable to come and talk to us.
Absolutely. I think ground transport has a big role to play as well, getting in and out of cabs and vans and taxis, and you're not as able, and you don't have to be disabled, but you just have to be of an age where you've had a knee op or a hip op or something. Life doesn't get easier, and you worry about your 40 years. Believe me, add 20 to that, you know that you're in another league. But I think one of the areas, and I've stood there so many times, whether I'm arriving at Heathrow or Charles de Gaulle or Oliver Tambo, and I'm thinking we could do so much better as far as customs, airports officials, security, singling out the the stereotypical, if ever there's humiliation, it
Yes.
sits in there. It really does. So
Yeah.
I don't know how we get to them.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I was on a panel with Virgin, and Virgin is doing a whole load of training in their frontline staff about the language and how to, make sure that even their language and they're inclusive. And they're doing that with their frontline staff. I think more people should do that with the frontline staff, because the problem is the frontline staff, how they talk to
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. It's service. It's the service. Yeah. We have, I see a hand up from Hamida, who comes to us from Zambia. And Hamida, congratulations. I believe she is the newly appointed chairperson of the Travel Agents Association in Zambia. So lovely to have you on board.
Thank you, Robyn. Thank you, Linda. This is very interesting. Just to let you know, what TAS, the Travel Agents Association in Zambia, is doing is we've actually approached immigration to create a special counter for those in wheelchairs. Because normally they are fast tracked, but we thought just to give that extra bit of attention or time, or just to make it easier for them, this is what we have been doing. So these we don't even think about these things, but I think they're so important, for those that have these disabilities or these issues. So I think it's a wake-up call. So thank you for that, Linda.
No problem. Thank you.
Great. And Jean, lovely to hear from you too.
Thank you so much, Robyn. Thank you so much, Linda and colleagues. It's my first time joining you, and thank you to Joey and Nikki for allowing me to be part of the meeting today. Just have a few questions for you, Linda. The first one, I want to know, are you a tour operator, or are you working as one, or a travel agent?
No,
Globally?
I actually work with I actually work with hotels, so hotels and apartments. So we act as an extension of their sales team. So I'm very much in the supplier side when it comes to hotels. But because I'm so nosy, that's why I tend to learn so much about all the other things as well. But my business was predominantly focusing on hotels and apartments. But I deal with a lot of procurement managers, and for me, it's about understanding what keeps them up at night, able to have meaningful conversations.
So if I were to come to you as a client looking for accommodation, maybe somewhere in New York or wherever, will you be able to assist me?
I hope so.
Okay.
So
Number two,
Yeah.
since you're dealing with hotels, do you normally do site inspection of the properties and check whether the hotels have got the wheelchairs that are capable for blind people?
Yes.
You do that?
Yeah, I definitely do that, because for me, it's about making sure that you are equipped with the right information. So, things like, pillows that vibrate. I ask that as part of my questions for my hotel partners, so that, if you are looking for a particular hotel in a particular niche, we can actually offer that as well for you.
Is it including the conferences or workshops if you want to have them internationally able to assist?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then are you able to advise maybe your clients in terms of the safety and security measures in a different country? Maybe they want to travel to maybe Pakistan, for instance. Are you able to advise them in advance that these are the challenges that they might encounter?
That is not my expertise, but what I can do is, as part of GBTA, we work closely with the risk committee. So we were doing something recently with the risk committee, so I can always connect you. I don't want to give you the wrong information, but we have a big risk committee that they're doing. I mean, risk is doing some amazing stuff, in terms of what you can and you can't do in various countries.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I'm answered.
And Jean, I think that a lot of the opportunities lies in going to your medical emergency the insurance companies. They really have people on the ground, keeping them very much informed as to things that are unsettled or places that should be avoided from a safety and security aspect.
Thank you. Thanks, Robyn.
Pleasure. Did I interrupt you, Linda? Were
No,
you
no,
about to say something?
I was about to say, I know that a lot of people that I work with use international SOS,
That's it, yeah.
you know, in terms of from a safety perspective, because I mean, let's face it, the world is changing every time. You know, you
No, exactly.
you wake up and, you know, something that happened. Funnily enough, I was at a GBTA conference and they were talking about how they're going to use AI, you know, to help us with this situation. It was quite spooky. I'll see if I can get the video. But the travel manager woke up and then, you know, went to sit behind their desk, and then the AI popped up. Let's say Susie popped up and said, this morning you have had this alert in this country and this country and this country. You have X amount of travelers in this country. Would you like us to reach out to them and find out if they're okay? But it was actually quite good, but it made me think about how we can use AI, because if you wake up and somebody has scraped the internet for all the news and has matched that with where your travelers are, that's pretty
brilliant. And I mean, there are products that do that rely on us as individuals to go in and source and pull the information. But no, I hear you. I think there's some great merit. But at the same time, if I was a traveler and Susie, the robot, phoned me, I'd be a bit offended. I wouldn't really want to know too much about that. Oh, sure. Well, Linda, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I thank you sincerely for taking the time and for sharing with us. It's really is something very close to all of our hearts, as I can imagine and can see. And we certainly will definitely be in contact with you again, and would love to contribute and continue to be a player in that global site. And as I say, there's lots of people who've got the time, the capacity, and the know-how. I'm offering, they've all got time and capacity between 2 and 4 in the morning. I know none of them are working, so they'd be only too happy to give you their time. But there is it, and you know, it's great, and I'm sure you feel the same. But we say if you're going to be part of an industry, you have to be part of the broader industry, and you have to actually give your time to those associations and those collections of people who are just, all you're striving for is the betterment of the industry. If you are just going to be a consumer and sit on the sideline and take whatever's negotiated on your behalf and take the good and leave the bad and not contribute and moan like hell, believe me, you have no, your time is not going to be a worthy one. And it is very fulfilling when you do work with the GBTA, for example, as well as the travel agency associations. There's a lot of really good energy and your knowledge, and you keep close to what's happening. It's so beneficial to the business you're in. It really is. So well done to you and your committee, and please thank them all for us. And thank you very much for your time.
No problem. I will, if you give me up until